Hi, I'm Alicia. My sister kissed my husband in my own house, in my own bed, while I was planning our anniversary. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just hit record. And when I sent the video to our parents, they didn't even flinch. That's when I realized, maybe they always knew, but the next morning, someone kicked down her front door. And what happened next? Even I wasn't ready for it. The morning had started like any other, quiet, soft, and just a little bit too still. Houston in early spring meant the air was light and breezy, the kind that makes you open your window just a crack, enough to smell the wet earth and cut grass from someone else's lawn. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cool tile, folding the small handkerchief I always placed in Dorian's jacket pocket. White cotton with a deep blue stitched A in the corner. My mother used to do this for my dad. I'd picked up the habit without realizing it. "Don't forget your lunch," I called toward the front hallway as Dorian slipped on his shoes. He didn't answer, just nodded slightly, eyes somewhere else. Not even a smile. That should have been the first sign. I held the handkerchief in my palm a second longer before tucking it in. A small gesture, sure, but it made me feel like we were still on the same page, still connected. 15 minutes later, I was backing out of our driveway, waving at old Mr. Lafferty across the street, who was already out with his rake like clockwork. My parents only lived a few blocks away, a place I knew so well I could drive there blindfolded. They'd asked me to help sort through some old boxes in the garage. Of course they did. Kimbra never got asked for that kind of thing. She was always too busy or overwhelmed or fragile, depending on who you asked. I tried not to let it get to me anymore. By the time I finished at their house, the sun had climbed higher and the heat had followed. I wiped sweat from my neck, already picturing the cold tea I had left on the kitchen counter back home. I reached into my purse for my glasses and sighed. Left them by the nightstand, I was sure of it. I turned the car around. Dorian had mentioned he might step out for a bit to run an errand. Said it casually over toast while half checking his phone. Something about needing to drop off paperwork. So when I pulled into the driveway and saw his car still parked there, I figured maybe plans had changed. Or maybe he forgot something too. I didn't think anything of it at first. Just opened the front door quietly, not wanting to spook him. Inside, the house felt unusually still, the kind of stillness that presses against your chest. I kicked off my shoes, padded down the hallway. "Dorian!" I called out lightly, but there was no answer. I headed toward the bedroom. The door wasn't shut. It hung halfway open, just enough to catch my eye. That alone made me pause. We always shut the bedroom door completely. It was a small habit, a mutual quirk. There was a noise then, a short laugh, muffled, too soft to pin down, but unmistakably not Dorian's voice alone. It was too light, too breathy. I stopped, just stopped. My fingers curled slightly at my side. For a long second, I didn't move. My chest tightened the way it used to when I was younger, whenever I heard raised voices behind a closed door. When Dad favored Kimbra, when Mom smoothed things over with a look and a lie. That same tension crawled back in, as if my body knew something before my mind could name it. I stepped forward. The hallway carpet hushed my feet. That door, barely ajar, felt suddenly like a line I hadn't meant to cross. Then I saw it. Lying on the floor, halfway pulled under the edge of the door, was the handkerchief. The one I'd tucked into Dorian's jacket not an hour earlier. My name, well, my initial, was right there, tilted, as if it had been yanked or dropped without a second thought. I crouched, hand trembling slightly as I reached for it. Why was it there? My mind started spinning, but my body stayed frozen. I heard the murmur of a second voice again, playful, teasing, and Dorian's low reply, impossible to make out but unmistakably intimate. Every sound suddenly felt loud, the tick of the hallway clock, my shallow breath, the faint whir of the ceiling fan down the hall. I inched closer to the door, pressing 2 fingers lightly against the wood. It gave way slightly, creaking almost imperceptibly. My heart thudded in response. The kind of thud you don't feel in your chest, but in your throat. A shadow passed across the sliver of light. Then stillness again. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I nudged the door open just enough for the truth to breathe, and what I saw next stole the air from my lungs. What waited beyond that cracked door struck me harder than any sound could have prepared me for. I drew in a slow breath, willing myself to stay steady as the rest of the room came into view. Kimbra was sitting on Dorian's lap, her arms looped around his shoulders as if she belonged there. His hands were on her waist. They were kissing, unhurried, familiar, like this wasn't the first time, like I was a footnote in my own marriage. And then Kimbra's voice drifted out, smug and low. "You deserve me, not that idiot." My name wasn't spoken, but it didn't have to be. I felt the words hit me like a slap. For a moment I couldn't move, not because I was afraid, but because every old memory rose at once. The years of being told to be the bigger person, the hours I spent cleaning up her messes, defending her choices, absorbing the blame so she could stay innocent in my parents' eyes. All of it lined up behind this moment, like it had been marching here for decades. I didn't make a sound. My hand moved before my mind caught up. I slipped my phone from my pocket, held it steady, and tapped record. My pulse thudded in my ears, but the rest of me went strangely calm, sharp, focused, the way you get when stepping through a situation that can blow up if you breathe wrong. Neither of them noticed. They were too wrapped up in themselves. I took one slow step back, then another. My heel brushed the hallway rug, grounding me. I had learned long ago not to burst into a room shouting. That kind of thing never ended well for the youngest kid. Every childhood argument I'd ever lost hovered at the edges of my mind. Let it go, Alicia. Stop overreacting. Your sister didn't mean it. The chorus that shaped who I became. The observer, the one who swallowed truth before anyone else could dismiss it. I backed away until the door was no longer in my line of sight. Only then did I let out a breath, careful not to make it too loud. Outside, the morning light felt harsher than before, bright enough to sting my eyes. I stepped into the yard, the phone still warm in my hand. The video thumbnail sat there, a tiny square holding the wreckage of my marriage and the confirmation that my family's old patterns hadn't stayed in the past. My fingers trembled, but I didn't hesitate. I opened the family group chat, Mom, Dad, Kimbra, and me. The same chat where they sent holiday photos, updates about church events, and reminders for potlucks. I sent the video, no caption, no explanation, just the truth. The message went through instantly. The screen stayed quiet. I waited. A minute passed, then another. Nothing. A sinking heaviness formed in my stomach, not because I expected applause, but because silence from the people who raised me felt too familiar. I'd hoped, just this once, for someone to say, "Alicia, we're here. This is wrong. We'll handle it." I thought maybe betrayal this blatant would break through whatever wall had always stood between me and the rest of them. But the stillness told me more than words could have. It felt practiced, like they weren't surprised, or worse, like they'd already forgiven Kimbra before even seeing the full clip. I climbed into my car, needing space, needing air that wasn't filtered through years of favoritism. The steering wheel felt cool under my hands as I gripped it, grounding myself. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just breathed slowly, letting the calm settle in enough so I could think clearly. I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the small park a few minutes away. My mind worked through everything with the same quiet determination I'd learned over a lifetime. Sit with the truth first, act second. Don't give anyone an excuse to say you made a scene. Not today, not anymore. I parked beneath a large oak tree, its branches swaying just enough to cast moving shadows across the dashboard. My phone lay face up beside me. Every few seconds I glanced at it, half expecting, half dreading a reply. When it finally buzzed, my breath caught. One message from my mother. "We'll talk when things calm down. Don't make a scene." I stared at the screen, my hands tightening until my knuckles ached. That sentence, 6 simple words, left a deeper mark than the betrayal itself. My mother's message burned through me, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if I had ever truly belonged in this family. I sat in the car for a long time, still parked under that old oak tree, phone in hand, my mother's message glowing back at me like a warning sign I'd ignored for too many years. "Don't make a scene." That wasn't just a request, it was a code, the same one they'd used since I was a child. I used to think it meant keeping peace. Now I saw it for what it was, keeping quiet. As the late morning sun began to shift above the rooftops, I started the engine and drove home in silence, my chest tight, thoughts looping without relief. Her words didn't just dismiss what happened, they stripped it of weight, as if betrayal between a sister and a husband could be brushed off like a bad haircut. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not with fury, but with a stillness that felt like surrender. I wasn't fighting to be believed anymore. I was finally just done explaining. Pulling into the driveway, the house looked the same. Neat, familiar, normal. But nothing felt normal. The house had shifted, or maybe I had. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, eyes drifting over the garden I'd planted with Dorian last spring. The marigolds were just starting to bloom. We picked them because they were low maintenance. "Just like us," he'd joked. I remember laughing. I closed my eyes, and with no warning, a memory surfaced. I was maybe 13 or 14. We had guests over, distant cousins, or maybe someone from church. I was walking past the kitchen and overheard my mom say, in that quiet voice she used when she thought I wasn't listening, "Alicia will be fine. Kimbra's the one we worry about." Back then, I smiled to myself. I thought it meant I was strong, capable, independent. But today, it landed differently. It meant my pain was manageable. Hers wasn't. It meant I could be overlooked because they'd already decided I could take it. That moment hit harder than anything else. It made this betrayal feel less like an exception and more like the inevitable result of a pattern I'd been born into. Kimbra got grace. I got silence. I finally walked inside. The air felt stale, heavy, as if the house itself knew something sacred had been broken. I sat on the couch and let my body sink into the cushions. My mind kept circling back to the video, the way Dorian had touched her, the casualness of it all. As if they had no reason to hide, as if they knew there would be no consequences. That, more than the act itself, left a deeper bruise. The confidence of it, the entitlement. I wasn't just hurt, I was insulted. They didn't even bother to be careful. The phone buzzed in my lap and I didn't jump. I just looked. One new message, this time from Dad. "Don't confront anyone until we understand the full situation. You're emotional right now." I stared at it, blinking. Emotional? Is that all this was to him? I didn't scream or throw the phone across the room. I didn't even reply. I just sat there, the resentment settling in my bones like cold. That same tired role, me being too sensitive, too much, too emotional, was being handed back to me like a script they expected me to recite on cue. But I wasn't 13 anymore. I wasn't going to swallow it just to keep peace. By the time the sun started lowering behind the neighbor's trees, my whole body ached, not from moving, but from carrying the weight of things unsaid. I realized then that my parents didn't want the truth. They wanted quiet. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to contain me. I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water with shaky hands, and leaned against the counter. I stared at my phone again, then typed a message, just one line. Did either of you already know about them? I didn't expect an instant reply, and I didn't get one. I sat on the couch, the glass untouched beside me, watching the light fade from the room. An hour passed, then another. Finally, the screen lit up. A message from my mother. "We'll discuss it tomorrow. Don't come over tonight." That final sentence felt like a locked door, and for the first time, I realized they were choosing sides. I stared at the message again, my eyes tracing every word like they might rearrange themselves into something softer. But they didn't. "Don't come over tonight." That wasn't just a delay, it was a denial. A locked door, not just to their home, but to the part of me that still believed I mattered enough to be heard. It was the first time in my adult life my parents told me not to come home, not to speak, not to ask. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in hand, and felt the kind of silence that bruises. Louder than yelling, sharper than judgment. A silence meant to shut me down, not keep the peace. By morning, the sky had turned a dull gray, the kind of Houston morning where the humidity hangs low and the clouds feel too tired to cry. I dressed slowly, choosing jeans and a plain blouse like I was heading to a job interview I didn't want. My hands shook when I tied my hair back. Not from fear, not exactly. It was more like my body knew this would be the kind of conversation that doesn't end when you walk away. The drive to their house was short, but it felt endless. Every stoplight gave me too much time to rehearse what I wanted to say. But halfway there, I stopped rehearsing. I shouldn't have to plan my words like I was prepping a defense. These were my parents. If I had to script the truth to be heard, what did that say about what they were willing to hear? I pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine, letting the quiet fill the car like fog. The front door opened just as I stepped out. My father stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. My mother lingered behind him, her arms crossed, her eyes looking past me. No hugs, no, "How are you?" Just a motion for me to come inside like I was a guest they weren't thrilled to see. The living room was too clean, too still. My father gestured to the couch. I sat. They stayed standing a beat longer than necessary, then finally settled into their usual spots across from me. I didn't speak first, neither did they, so I broke it. "Did either of you know about them?" My voice didn't shake. It was calm, too calm. That kind of calm that comes right before something shatters. My father shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, and looked down at his hands. "Kimbra has struggled her whole life," he said finally. "We can't judge her as harshly as we judge you." The words didn't land softly. They landed like a slap. My mother added almost gently, "She's lonely in her marriage. You know how her husband can be." I blinked. For a moment, I actually checked my own reality. Had I imagined the betrayal? Did I exaggerate it? No, I hadn't. I leaned forward slightly. "So it's my job to absorb her mistakes, even when she destroys my marriage?" My mother looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that morning. Her face was tight, her lips pressed together. "Your marriage had problems before this. Don't make everything about one moment." I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. Of course they'd find a way to make this my fault. Every time Kimbra burned something down, I was the one expected to sweep it up. My pain was always negotiable. Hers was sacred. Then my father spoke again, and this time the air changed. "You need to let this go quietly," he said. "We don't want a family scandal. Don't contact her husband. Don't escalate." I froze, not because I was scared, but because it suddenly clicked. They weren't trying to protect me. They were managing optics. The illusion of unity meant more to them than the actual truth. They weren't worried about what happened. They were worried about who might find out. In that moment, I saw it clearly. This betrayal wasn't between 3 people. It was between 4. And I was the one they all expected to stay quiet. I stood up. "Sit down, Alicia," my father said, not unkindly. But I didn't. I looked at them both and felt something shift, not in them, but in me. Kimbra had acted like she had nothing to lose, because she didn't. She had a safety net woven from our parents' forgiveness, from years of them brushing her mistakes under the rug and calling it compassion. She knew I wouldn't blow it up because that's how I was raised. Be polite, be quiet, be the bigger person, but not today. I walked toward the door without a word. My father called my name once, soft, tentative. I didn't turn around. Out in the car, I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just sat there, staring out the windshield, trying to figure out how long I'd been mistaking silence for peace. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was simple, no words, just a screenshot. It was Roy and Kimbra, standing close in her driveway, his arms around her back. She was smiling. Timestamp, this morning. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew exactly what it meant. They didn't stop. They didn't even try. I sat there, staring at the photo, and something inside me gave way, not with a crash, but like a thread quietly snapping. They didn't stop. They didn't even hesitate. The photo wasn't just proof of their betrayal. It was proof that I didn't matter enough for them to hide it. The truth of that hurt more than I expected. Not the affair itself, not even the lies, but the ease of it, the casual comfort in how they continued, as if I were already erased. I drove home on autopilot, the roads blurred by a haze I couldn't blink away. My chest felt tight, like there wasn't enough oxygen in the air, or maybe just not enough space left inside me for the weight of everything I was holding. Each breath was shallow, like I was borrowing air instead of owning it. Inside the house, everything was exactly where I left it, but nothing felt the same. I moved slowly, like the floor might crack beneath me. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was something worse, unsure of my own footing in a life I thought I understood. How long had they been doing this? How many dinners had I cooked? How many conversations had I trusted while they were building something behind my back? How many little lies were tucked inside the ordinary days? The garage door opened. It was early. Roy was home. He walked in quietly, like someone rehearsing a scene. His footsteps were careful. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. He set his keys down on the counter and leaned against it like we were about to talk about groceries or bills. "I shouldn't have come home this early," he said, then caught himself. "I mean, we made a mistake. It wasn't what it looked like." His voice was measured, practiced. That's when I knew this wasn't regret. It was damage control. He wasn't sorry he hurt me. He was sorry he got caught. Before I could speak, he added, "Your parents said you're overreacting. They told me you get emotional when you're stressed, that you always take things too far." There it was. He used my family's words like a weapon, as if they gave him permission to dismiss me. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked, "Is this the first time?" He blinked, paused. Too long. That silence told me everything I needed. He didn't answer. Instead, he pivoted. "You've been distant lately," he said, looking past me. "You've been cold. It's been hard to connect." There it was again, the shift, from apology to accusation, from guilty to justified, and something inside me collapsed, quietly, deeply, a kind of internal folding, like a building imploding in slow motion. I turned away from him, not because I was afraid I'd scream, but because I wouldn't. And that scared me more. I walked into his office, just needing space, Or maybe needing to find a version of him that still made sense. What I found instead was a folder, half tucked beneath some paperwork on his desk. It was thick with bank statements. I flipped one open, then another, and another. At first, I thought it was nothing. Small charges, spa services, boutique cafes. But then I saw the name of a luxury hotel. The same one from a credit card alert I'd once brushed off as probably an error. Multiple transactions. Some in his name, some in mine. Several linked to a loyalty account registered to Kimbra's email address. The room tilted. He used our money, my money, to fund their affair. They didn't just lie. They used me to pay for it. I sank to the floor, the folder spread open beside me. My hands were numb. My legs refused to support me. How had I missed it? Had I been so desperate to believe I had a marriage, I refused to see it crumbling? A voice inside me whispered, "You've done this before. You looked the other way for your sister, for your parents. You made excuses because you were always told your pain didn't count if someone else's was louder. Had I done that in my marriage too? Was I boring, too forgiving, too quiet? I didn't know what hurt more, what they'd done or the parts of me that allowed it." My phone buzzed. I wiped my hands on my jeans and picked it up. One message from Dane, Kimbra's husband. Just one line. "We need to talk. It's not the first time for them." I sat up straighter. My heartbeat jumped, not from fear, but from something else. A shift, a new thread tugging at the mess. He knew. And not only did he know, he had known longer than me. I stood, pressing a hand to the wall to steady myself. The weight of it all was crushing. But this was a door cracking open. Someone else had lived in this same silence. Someone else had been used, lied to, betrayed, and wasn't pretending it didn't happen. I typed back, "Tell me everything." Dane's message hovered on my screen like a weight pressing down on my chest. It was just a few words, but they carried enough gravity to shift everything inside me. It's not the first time for them. I didn't move right away. My thumb hovered over the screen as if touching the truth might make it more real. I thought I was bracing for impact before, but now I understood that the ground had been unsteady far longer than I realized. We agreed to meet just after 4, behind a small coffee shop tucked away from the main street. I parked in the shade of a leaning oak tree, the humid Houston air curling around me like a damp sheet. My hands rested in my lap as I waited. The heat was unbearable, but the wait was worse. Dane pulled in quietly, parking one spot over. He looked thinner than I remembered, like the months had drained something out of him. His eyes were puffy and bloodshot, and when he stepped out, I saw the faint tremor in his hand holding a plain white envelope. He didn't say hello, just offered the envelope and nodded toward the passenger seat. I unlocked the door without a word. We sat side by side, like strangers who'd survived the same storm but hadn't yet spoken about what they'd lost. I opened the envelope with numb fingers and pulled out a stack of printed screenshots, texts. Some of them were mundane, others weren't. Flirting, jokes at mine and Dane's expense, late-night messages, talk of missed chances, of what could have been if we'd been honest sooner. Then one dated 2 weeks before my last anniversary. "Roy, you looked amazing today. That green dress should be illegal. Kimbra, you know I only wear it when I hope you'll stop by." And then, "Roy, Alicia's working late. I'll swing by around 6. Kimbra, bring wine. I've had such a day pretending." I stopped reading. My throat closed up. The affair hadn't started recently. It hadn't been a mistake. It was woven into the fabric of my marriage, into moments I thought were innocent, even loving. They had been planning around me, living in the margins of my life, using my trust like a shield. I blinked back tears and turned to Dane. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I thought maybe it was recent. Maybe I could understand that kind of weakness, that moment." He looked at me, then down at his hands. I caught her once, back in April. She swore it wasn't physical, said she was just venting, that Roy was just someone who listened. My stomach twisted. She cried, said she hated herself, promised to get help. We even talked about counseling. And you believed her? I asked. I needed to, he said. For the kids, for my own sanity, I just needed it to be fixable. We both sat there, silent for a long beat. Then Dane's voice dropped, lower, rougher. I told your parents, not everything, but enough. Enough that if they'd wanted to stop it, they could have. I turned sharply. You told them? He nodded. I called your mom. I was desperate. Kimbra was spiraling and I didn't know who else to turn to. I thought maybe they'd get through to her. My hands went cold. What did she say? He reached into his wallet and pulled out another folded sheet of paper. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. We'll handle it privately. Don't involve Alicia. She's too reactive. Too reactive. That's what I'd always been to them. Not hurting, not wronged. Just too much. I felt something slide loose in me. Not a tear, not a scream, just a thread pulling free. They treated me like the problem even when I didn't know there was one, I murmured. Dane nodded slowly. Same. Two people, same betrayal, different angles. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure who he was apologizing for, and I wasn't sure it mattered. The sun dipped behind the coffee shop, casting a long shadow across the dashboard. I could feel something shifting in me, a change I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt sharpened. They're planning to move in together, Dane said suddenly. She doesn't know I heard, but I did. She was on the phone. Said they'd wait for the dust to settle, then find a place in Austin. I stared ahead, not speaking. Then he added, she told someone, maybe your mom, I don't know. Alicia will be fine. She always bends. She never breaks. That line, that one. It didn't just sting, it ignited. I turned toward the window, blinking at the sky, my mind racing. They all expected me to bend, to smooth things over, to swallow it, carry it, move on quietly like I always had. They counted on that, but I wasn't bending anymore. I opened the car door and stepped out, the envelope still in my hand. Thank you, I told Dane. For what? For confirming what I already felt. I didn't wait for a reply. As I walked back to my car, I didn't feel light, but I did feel clear. If my family chose silence, I'd choose truth. If they wanted peace, they should have chosen honesty. I started the engine and backed out of the lot, the tires crunching softly over gravel. The path ahead wasn't easy, but it was mine. I didn't need justice from them. I needed it for me. And I knew exactly where I needed to go next. I drove toward Kimbra's street, not to confront her, but to confirm something far more important. I turned onto Kimbra's street just after sunset, when the sky still held a faint purple hue, but the streetlights had started to buzz on. The air was thick, heavy with that late summer stillness that made everything feel closer than it should. I cut the engine a few houses down, eased the car to the curb, and lowered my seat back just enough to keep a low profile. My heart was beating steadily, but hard. Not out of fear, at least not anymore. It was something else now, something colder, focused. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe proof, maybe permission, or maybe just the final nail that would stop me from clinging to the fantasy that this was salvageable. From where I sat, I could see the soft glow of Kimbra's kitchen window spilling onto the driveway. The blinds were halfway drawn, but the silhouette of the room was visible, shadows moving, soft flickers of motion. Then Roy's truck pulled in. He didn't even bother to park on the street. just rolled right into the driveway like it belonged to him, like he belonged there. I watched him step out, adjusting his shirt, glancing around, not to check for prying eyes, but with the casual confidence of a man who had nothing to hide. He walked to the door, pulled out a key, and let himself in. That did it. My fingers gripped the steering wheel, tight. There was no guilt, no hesitation. They were done hiding because, to them, there was nothing left to hide. My marriage, my trust, my place in the family, they had already stripped it away, long before I realized it was gone. I left the car slowly, walked down the sidewalk like any neighbor might. Calm, ordinary. My feet moved on instinct while my ears strained toward the open kitchen window. I stopped just beyond the hedge. I heard Kimbra's voice first, laughing, light, almost playful. "Even if she finds out everything, Mom and Dad will handle her. They always do." The words hit me like a slap. Then Roy. "She doesn't fight back. She folds. She always has." I stood there, frozen. Every cell in my body locked in place as my breath caught. They weren't just cheating. They were mocking me, deconstructing me like I was a character in a bad novel they'd grown tired of, as if I'd been nothing more than a background role in their little play. The laughter inside continued, muted only by the faint hum of the refrigerator motor. That was the moment it all came together for me. This wasn't about love or mistakes or even betrayal anymore. This was strategy. They had built this on the assumption that I would do what I always did: bend, adjust, swallow my anger. And maybe I would have. Maybe I almost did, but not anymore. I turned to leave, eyes stinging, throat burning, when I heard the front door creak open behind me. I ducked low, slipped behind a parked SUV, heart pounding in my ears. Roy stepped out onto the porch, phone pressed to his ear. His tone was casual, almost upbeat. "Yeah, everything's on track. We'll announce soon. The timing's perfect." He laughed lightly. Then a pause, and the line that chilled my spine. "If Alicia becomes a problem, I'll make sure she looks unstable. Her parents already believe it." I stopped breathing. That wasn't anger. That wasn't disappointment. That was a plan. He wasn't just trying to erase me emotionally. He was prepping to discredit me, to make sure if I fought back, no one would listen. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was danger. I stayed hidden until I heard the door close again. Then I moved, quickly but quietly, back to my car. Sitting in the driver's seat, I stared straight ahead, trying to absorb what I'd just heard. My hands were shaking, but my mind was sharp, clearer than it had been in weeks. He didn't know what I had. He didn't know I had copies of those messages, bank records, Dane's testimony, my mother's written dismissal, and he had no clue I'd heard what he just said. That changed the game. He thought I was still in the dark, still playing catch-up. But for the first time since this all began, I was ahead of them. I didn't drive away right away. I sat for a long moment, letting my pulse slow. The pain was still there, deep and throbbing, but now it had shape, direction. I wasn't going to fight for what was gone. I was going to protect what was left. Me. As I started the engine, headlights illuminated my dashboard, and a buzz sounded from my phone. I glanced down. It was Dane. "Something is happening at their house right now. You need to be careful." I looked up. Headlights again, different this time, brighter, faster, barreling toward Kimbra's driveway like something out of a movie. And whoever was driving, they weren't planning to stop. The truck barreled toward the driveway, tires shrieking against the pavement, its headlights cutting through the humid night like searchlights. I barely had time to sit upright before it skidded to a hard, angry halt. The driver's door flew open. Dane. He leapt out, chest heaving, eyes blazing with a fury I hadn't seen in him before. not frustration, not pain. This was something more primal. His face was flushed, jaw clenched, fists already balled like he didn't trust himself not to explode. I got out of my car, but stayed by the door, watching, waiting. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. Whatever he had just discovered had snapped the last thread holding him together. He marched toward the front porch, and before I could move, he raised his leg and kicked the front door, hard. The crack of wood echoed like a gunshot down the quiet street. "Roy!" he bellowed. "Get out here!" The porch light flicked on. Roy appeared in the doorway, wide-eyed, shirt untucked like he'd been too comfortable for too long. Kimbra stood behind him in a blanket, arms crossed, as if the night air was too much for her thin skin. Her face flickered, shock first, then a flicker of calculation. I stayed rooted on the sidewalk, a safe distance, but close enough to see everything. "What the hell is this?" Roy barked, voice rising. "You tell me," Dane shouted back. "Tell her. Go on. Tell her the truth." Kimbra stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Dane, this isn't the time." "No," he snapped. "Now is exactly the time. You've had plenty of time." I felt my spine straighten. Instead of anxiety, a strange calm settled into me. Every moment I had folded to keep the peace suddenly felt like fuel. My breath slowed. My heartbeat didn't race. It steadied. Dane turned slightly and pointed at me. "She deserves to know what you promised them." Kimbra's gaze flicked to me, then to the ground. Dane's voice cracked from the strain of holding it all in. "Tell her how you used her parents to keep her in check. Tell her about the agreement." That word landed like a stone in my stomach. Agreement? Kimbra froze. Roy tried to step in front of her, playing protector. "She's confused," Roy said, glancing toward me with practiced condescension. "Your parents were just trying to help you. They knew you had trouble managing." "Stop," I said, stepping forward now, past the gate, onto the walkway. My voice didn't shake. "Is it true?" Kimbra's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes welled, but I didn't care. Roy, ever the voice of manipulation, answered instead. "They wanted what was best for you. They thought if Kimbra could talk you through things, help you stay grounded." I held up my hand, cutting him off. "So they sent my sister to manage me, not help me, not love me, but keep me quiet." He shrugged, as if it were some kind of mercy. Dane pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket and handed it to me. "I found this in one of the email threads between your father and Kimbra. I was going to burn it, but you need to see it." I unfolded it slowly. It was printed. An email dated 8 months ago. "Keep an eye on her. She tends to dramatize things. Guide her if necessary." I stared at the line, reading it again and again until it blurred. That was my father's voice, his careful, cold tone, framing my feelings as exaggeration, framing me as unstable. That was never protection. That was grooming me to doubt myself. Kimbra's lip trembled. "Alicia, please don't make this worse. We can fix this." Roy chimed in, tone smug. "Be smart. Don't turn this into some big scene. Walk away before you embarrass yourself." Those words didn't sting anymore. They clarified everything. I saw them both, not as people I once loved, but as architects of a version of my life that was never truly mine. They built it to contain me, not to support me. I looked at Dane, his chest still rising and falling like he'd run a marathon through betrayal. "We're done here," I said. He nodded once. "We're taking this to the authorities, and to everyone they fooled." Roy stepped forward, just an inch, a warning gesture. "You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly." I pulled out my phone and raised it. "Touch me and this goes live. Every file, every message, every bank transfer, every word you think no one saw." He stopped, right there. For the first time, it was him who flinched. Not out of guilt, but fear. Real, sharp, skin-prickling fear. I turned and walked away. Dane followed. Behind us, Kimbra's sobs broke through the quiet, and Roy cursed under his breath. But I didn't turn around. The air felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but sharper, honest. I had no illusions about what was coming. This wasn't over. This was the beginning. As I slid behind the wheel and started the engine, my phone buzzed again. A familiar number lit up the screen. My mother. And just like that, I knew. The reckoning had begun, and the weight of it settled over the car as my mother's number glowed on the screen. I answered, holding the phone a few inches from my ear, bracing myself. Her voice came through thin and shaky, like she already knew she'd lost control of whatever story she'd been trying to shape. "Please don't ruin the family," she whispered. For most of my life, that sentence would have knocked the breath from me. I would have scrambled to reassure her, soften my tone, shrink myself down, until I fit into the version of daughter she wanted. Quiet, agreeable, predictable. But something in me had shifted out on that sidewalk, watching lies unravel in real time. I no longer felt small. I no longer believed silence was safety. "Mom," I said, steady. "The family was broken long before tonight. I'm just refusing to pretend anymore." The line went silent. I heard her inhale, that sharp, disbelieving gasp I'd spent years avoiding. She wasn't used to this version of me. Maybe I wasn't either. "Alicia," she murmured, voice cracking. "We were trying to protect her. She was always fragile. We didn't know how to handle you." There it was, the confession wrapped as justification. Not fragile, spoiled, not protective, controlling. All the pieces I'd tiptoed around for years clicked into place. They weren't apologizing. They were explaining why my pain had always been negotiable. "I'm done being managed," I said quietly. A rustle on the line, then my father's voice cut through, stern, clipped, irritated. "Alicia, you are overreacting. You'll regret this when things calm down." His confidence used to shake me. Tonight, it didn't move me an inch. "Dad," I said, "things are not going to calm down. Not this time." I shifted the phone to my other hand, watching the streetlights blur through the windshield, my pulse steady for the first time all night. "I sent everything to an attorney," I said. "All of it. Screenshots, transfers, messages, the video." I heard my father exhale in a long, low rush. My mother gasped softly, as if someone had stepped on her chest. "This is going forward," I added, "with or without your support." "You'll destroy us," my mother said, not even trying to hide the desperation. "No," I replied, "I'm letting truth do its job. Whatever breaks wasn't my doing." Their whispering carried faintly over the line. Panic, accusations, scrambled questions. I didn't stay for the rest. I lowered the phone and ended the call. Hanging up wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the first boundary I'd set in decades. The silence in the car didn't feel empty. It felt earned. A few minutes later, as I drove toward home, my screen lit up again, this time with a message from Dane. "I filed the complaint. You don't have to do this alone." His words felt grounding, not like someone stepping in to rescue me, but like someone taking their rightful share of the truth. I typed back that I'd meet him and the attorney in the morning. No theatrics, no big declarations, just two people moving forward because no one else ever protected us. By the time I reached my street, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a tired clarity. The night felt still, almost too still, and for a moment I simply sat in the driveway, letting the quiet settle inside me. Morning came earlier than I expected. I woke to the vibration of my phone on the nightstand. Alert after alert. Neighbors reaching out, a coworker sending a clipped message asking if I was okay, and one from a number I didn't recognize at first. Then it hit me. It was one of Dane's friends. The message was short. Police were at Kimbra's house before sunrise. I slid my feet onto the floor, bracing myself, and scrolled through the rest. By the time the sun came up, Roy had been taken into custody. Not for infidelity, Texas doesn't care about broken vows, but for siphoning money from accounts with my name on them. The officers had the documentation Dane and I uncovered. They had bank statements, emails, enough to make the charges real and heavy. Kimbra had refused to cooperate and ended up escorted out of the house. Officers weren't arresting her, but they weren't letting her stay inside either. A neighbor even mentioned a half-cracked front door still hanging crooked from when Dane kicked it. That image stuck with me, like the house itself had split at the seams. I dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove by. Not to gloat, but to close a circle I never asked to walk. Boxes sat on the driveway. Officers were talking near the curb. One of them scribbled notes on a clipboard, while another kept an eye on Roy's truck. Kimbra sat at the edge of the porch steps, elbows on her knees, head lowered like a child caught stealing. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel overshadowed by her. She wasn't the center. She wasn't the exception. She was simply a person facing the consequences she'd avoided for years. And I felt free, not happy, not healed, but free in a quiet, sturdy way I hadn't known I needed. I drove back home, parked in the driveway, and walked inside. The living room felt different, not lonely, open. I stood there for a long moment, breathing slowly, letting the weight of everything settle. The scars existed, yes, and the hurt hadn't disappeared. Healing wasn't something that arrived overnight, but for the first time, the hurt wasn't winning. I didn't break, I whispered to myself. I changed. My phone buzzed again, Dane letting me know the lawyer was waiting when I was ready. I picked up my purse and stepped outside, locking the door behind me, walking toward a future that wasn't handed to me, shaped for me, or controlled by anyone else. It was mine, and I was finally choosing it. And for the first time in years, I felt the world open instead of close.